Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our series, Getting Personal with Parkinson's Facebook Live event. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of Health and Wellness for the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, and the Program Coordinator for the Edmund J. Safra Parkinson's Wellness Program, supported by New York's largest health care provider, Northwell Health. For over 12 years, the JCC has been hosting programs for individuals living with Parkinson's. You can find these programs on our website at www.mmjccm.org/Parkinson's. We'll also put that information in the comments section. Anyone can join our program. I'm delighted to welcome you to our weekly series that you can find right here on the JCC Facebook page. Our desire with this conversation is to make this personal, to put a face to Parkinson's, to introduce you to people living with PD or those that love them or care for them, who will share their strategies and resources that have helped them thrive, as well as hear from experts who will talk about updates in research, and maybe even a celebrity or two will stop by to entertain us. You never know. This program is for you, anyone whose life has been impacted by PD, including those diagnosed, as well as family and friends. We welcome your input and ideas. We will create this show together. Let us know if you have anyone you want to be a guest, or if you yourself want to come on the show. We would like to feature you or a topic of interest that is relevant to you. All inquiries can be directed to Whitney Chapman at wchapman@mmjccm.org. Again, look to the comment section and you will find her information there. And now I am so excited to introduce you to my friend Suzette Shahmoon. Suzette is a cognitive hypnotherapist and is also currently researching well-being in people living with Parkinson's and their caregivers for her Ph.D. at the Institute of Neurology in London. She is someone who has had personal and professional experience with Parkinson's. Suzette and I had a chat that we pre-recorded, which I want to share with you now, and then we'll be meeting, so stay tuned afterwards for a live Q&A. So as you watch the program, if you have questions, please put them in the comment section of the Facebook Live, and we will happily answer them. And now, on with the show. So nice to see you, and thank you so much for, when I was thinking about doing this series, you were one of the first people I wanted to talk to because of your experience as a wife, as a mother, as a researcher, as a therapist. You've been living with Parkinson's for a long time, right?
I have indeed.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Tell me about the first time you realized that your husband had Parkinson's.
That's a good question. So first time I realized my husband was ill was not the first time I realized he had Parkinson's. I was 19 when I met my husband, and we would go out, as you do. He was 24. We went out on a couple of dates, and on our second date, I was like, something's wrong. It doesn't make sense. He's falling over all the time. He'd be exhausted by the end of the evening, even though we'd only been out for an hour for dinner. And I think on our third date, I actually took him to see my doctor. And my doctor said, he's a very bright man. I don't think his body can keep up with his mind. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I'm sure he's fine. But there was always that thing of, why is he falling over? Why doesn't he have the energy? We got engaged very quickly. We got married within a year of us meeting. And even on our honeymoon, he was falling over all the time. He was exhausted all the time. And so we carried on looking for an answer. We just didn't know what was going on with him. But he was getting worse. And it was 3 years into our marriage, 2 kids later, that he was diagnosed. And when we went for the scan the first time round, they said, it was in December of 1998. And they said, we're looking for either a brain tumor, MS, or Parkinson's. And the day after the scan, we got a phone call saying, yep, we were right, it's one of them, we'll see you in January. And that was probably the most horrific month of my life. Because I didn't know, I didn't know what was going on with my husband. I didn't know if they were being nice to me because it was his last, his last Christmas, so to speak, or I didn't know what was going on. And so then you end up with telling yourself in your head, you're like, well, at least I'll know. And knowing has to be better than not knowing, because then you know what you're dealing with. And then you go through that whole backwards and forwards of, I don't really want to know, because right now, ignorance is bliss.
Right. And how old were your kids?
At that time, I only had two, and they were 2 years old and 6 months old. So they were tiny. It didn't stop us from having two more. Parkinson was not going to stop us from living. It's that thing of, it's something that you learn to live with. It's like the ugly cousin who's come who moves into your house. It doesn't stop you from living. So we still had two more kids, but then you have that whole thing of, you're raising kids and you don't know, when do you tell them? What do you tell them? And
right.
How do you bring that in? And daddy's not well. What do you say? It was just, it was a very interesting, it's been an interesting journey.
And how about for you? I mean, were there any of your peers? Was there anyone else that you knew that was going through this?
Okay, so this is where you're going to see my age. No, and we didn't have social media. There was very little internet in those days. So now, I mean, it's probably one of the loneliest moments of my life, because, your friends get together, at Mummy and Me groups, and they're complaining about how their husbands are coming home late from work. And I'm sitting there going, I can't sit there and say, my husband's struggling to get up in the morning because he's not well. So it was, no one could understand what I was going through. Anyone I'd heard about who had Parkinson's was so much older. My husband was 28 when he was diagnosed. So there was no one of our peer group, no one in our age range. Maybe someone had a grandfather or a grandmother with Parkinson's, but there was no one who I could ask, how do I manage this? How do I, what's going on? Because there's so many different symptoms and things crop up and you don't know, is it Parkinson's? Is it something else? So it was a very lonely time. And I think it brought us closer at the beginning of our marriage, for sure, because only we understood each other. No one else could understand what we were going through. So it gave as well as it took away from us.
Wow. And it led you to your current profession in some ways, my understanding is. Can you tell us about that?
It did. So when about 10 years after my husband's diagnosis, he fell over. He was falling into the street and I pulled him away, pulled him out of the street, and I herniated 3 discs in my neck. And I ended up in hospital about a year later. I think I battled with it for about a year because I didn't really want surgery, but eventually I had no choice. And the night before, my pain specialist came in and turned around to me and said, sweetheart, hopefully tomorrow we're going to give you your life back. And you have some decisions to make about how you continue to live your life, because right now your sole purpose is caring for your husband and kids, and it's not really doing you any favors. And I want you to spend the next 6 weeks while you're recuperating thinking about what you do with your life. And he was right. And now that I've studied positive psychology, we sit there and we talk about the most important things which make up well-being, and that's happiness, it's engagement, it's meaning in life, and it's pleasure. And I had pleasure. I had lots of pleasure. I had a husband and children who gave me a lot of pleasure. Engagement, I was engaged in my life, but my life didn't have any other purpose other than taking care of everyone else. So I went and trained as a therapist so I could help more people. But but on my terms, in a way which I wanted to do it, rather than a way which was enforced on me, in a way. That sounds a little bit harsh, but it's not. What I mean was, my husband and I didn't choose Parkinson's, but I could choose to work as a therapist. And I think that changed my life. And I've worked with people with Parkinson's since, and people with lots of different illnesses, not just Parkinson's, cancer, MS, you name it. And it changed my life. It helped me to reconnect to who I was as a person, rather than just someone who lives with someone with Parkinson's, someone who supports someone with Parkinson's. And it's that started me going down this amazing career journey, where just going back to university and learning and studying, I found another thing which we talk about in positive psychology is we talk about strengths, the things, not the things that you're good at, but the things which feed you and give you strength. And I found that, another thing which really feeds me and gives me energy is learning. And so while I was at uni, I absolutely loved it. And my husband went and had deep brain stimulation surgery. And I was talking to the nurses about everything that I was learning about hope and meaning in life, and all these amazing things which I was working on with cancer patients and carers for people with MS. And they said, why don't you come and do a PhD with us, come research this. And so it led me to that as well, which has been amazing. I'm currently doing my PhD, which is just the maddest thing in the world to think about that. But looking at well-being in people with Parkinson's, and it's been amazing.
Tell us about your research, because that leads right into that.
So for me, I sit there and I look at, as I said, I work with lots of people with lots of different illnesses, not just Parkinson's. And I do find that when someone is diagnosed with a chronic long-term condition, automatically we focus on the symptoms, the physical symptoms. And there's no denying that the happier you are, the better you cope with your physical symptoms. And there's a connection between the mind and body. And so for me, it was, okay, why aren't we looking at well-being in people with Parkinson's? Why aren't we looking at how can people survive, not just survive their life, but live their life? My life changed the day I learned about what gives me energy, what keeps me strong, what makes me feel like me. My husband as well, he's just was inspirational at finding, nothing ever stopped him from doing what he loved. Even if he was having a bad day, he would, humor is something, it was one of his top strengths. Again, one of those things which gives him energy. When he's having a bad day, he'll put on something which makes him laugh. He'll bring friends over and he'll have a laugh with them. He's an amazing person. He knows what works for him. I worked with a gentleman who absolutely loves art galleries. No, it was a woman, sorry. She loved art galleries. And for her, she had just retired and she was looking forward to her retirement. And she loved going and wandering around art galleries. And then she got Parkinson's and she found it much harder. And so she started hiding away in her home, not hiding away, but she found it harder to get out. And she lost that impetus to go out and do the thing that she loved. And it was like, okay, fine. But okay, you can't spend a full day. But even if you spent 20 minutes, isn't that better than no time? Go and see one painting rather than nothing at all, or watch a YouTube video. So all of these things, that's what my research is based on, is what makes people tick? What makes you, to what extent does Parkinson's affect your meaning in life? To what extent does Parkinson's affect your hope, your self-esteem, your self-compassion? Because if it is having an effect on these are things that need to be addressed as much as the non-motor symptoms and the motor symptoms from me. Because the whole point is you have one life and you don't just stop living because you have Parkinson's. You live it to the best of your capability. But if you want to do that, you need to know what feeds you, how to do that. So that's where I'm
Talk
going.
more about that. Like if somebody says, oh gosh, how do I figure out what feeds me? Should they do the via strengths assessment? Should they make a list? I mean, what would you recommend?
So definitely the VIA strengths assessment is it's the most incredible tool. I give it to everyone who comes to see me because they've got an illness or because they're caring for someone with an illness, because you do lose your sense of self, I find, or it's very easy to lose your sense of self. You become that illness almost. It's everything you love seems to be shut off if you don't make the effort to find new ways of doing the things you love or finding new things to love. So yeah, the VIA strength assessment is definitely a fantastic tool to help you to work that out. Another thing is just if you don't have the energy to sit down and fill out a questionnaire, think about what makes you happy, what gives you energy in life. Think about the times in your life where you felt fulfilled, the times in your life where you were you at your best, the times in your life where you were engaged. Think about your purpose in life. And then I worked with the most amazing gentleman. He had terminal cancer. And for him, he did the VIA strengths assessment. And his top strengths were teamwork and fairness and social action, social justice.
Social justice, yeah.
Social justice, right? And he was very, very unwell. And he was literally sitting on his couch, too ill to do anything. And we looked at his strengths. And I said, okay, well, I'm not surprised you're depressed. What if these are your strengths and you're at home sitting on your couch watching TV without much energy? I said, okay, if there was something that you could do to engage these strengths, what would you be doing right now? And he said, I don't know, maybe I could mentor someone with my illness. And I said, fantastic, that sounds amazing. Okay, how are you going to do that? He said, well, I guess there is an association which is connected to my type of cancer. I guess I could call them up and ask them if there's anyone newly diagnosed who would like a mentor. The next thing you know, and it is unbelievable, he within a month, this man was no longer on his couch. He was out on the golf course. I mean, he was just the most incredible person. Even his oncologist turned around to him and said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it because it's working better than any treatment that we're giving you at the moment. He was unbelievable. He was mind-blowing. And that's the point. It's when you see, that's just by engaging in life in the right way, working out, as I said, what gives you energy, it changes everything. So for Parkinson's, it's that same thing. For me, learning. I know when I was having a dip, when I was struggling, when I was tired, then I needed to go put on a YouTube video or a TED talk, something which was going to feed my brain and get those neurons firing again, because then I felt a little bit more like myself and it gave me the energy to get on with whatever else I needed to do in my day.
You make such a good point. When we have energy, then we can motivate ourselves to move, to get up and go. And I was thinking about gratitude and how gratitude is one of the fastest ways to get energy. Can you talk about how gratitude, working with Parkinson's, living with someone who has Parkinson's, having 4 children with Parkinson's, how do you use that and how do you do that?
Endlessly. It's one of my top strengths. So definitely it's without a doubt for me, it's that thing of you have 2 choices in life. You can look at what Parkinson's takes from you, or you can look at the things that it hasn't taken from you. And actually, now I'll add a third choice, and you can look at the things that it's given you. For me, you have to make a conscious effort to do it. Okay. It's very easy for me to sit here and preach. It's not always been easy for me to do this. So, I'm not sitting here saying this is a simple thing to do. There are days where I think it's absolutely fine and right for you to get upset, get angry, and not be grateful. But then allow yourself an hour to do that, and then start looking for the things that you can be grateful for, because chances are you will find them. When you look for it, you find it. For me, it was, okay, well, I have 4 children who have grown up with an ill father. I have 4 children who never really knew what it was like to have a dad take them to the park and throw a ball around. He just couldn't do that with them. But they also have a father who was home a lot, home early, and he couldn't run a ball, go and play with a ball, but he has the most incredible mind. He can sit down with them and talk to them and watch them cut and draw and stick and make plays for him and dance for him. And, so I sat there and yes, there were loads of things that we weren't able to do. We couldn't go out on family picnics with other families, but we could have our special time as a family while our kids were young and growing up, because my husband wasn't flying around the world in one of those jobs which takes him away. He wasn't working until 11 o'clock at night. And I'm grateful for that, because my children did see their father a lot. They did, I could sit and moan about what I didn't have, but no, I'm grateful for what I did have. I'm grateful for what my children had growing up. And it's just looking for it. It's a mindset.
Yeah. Speaking of which, kind of, getting into those moods, and you said, like, don't let yourself stay there for too long. That's your other work, isn't it? With hypnotherapy and that we can get hijacked by our limbic brain. We can get hijacked by patterns that of the past, of how we've been thinking. And can you talk a little bit about that kind of therapy and what drew you to that? And was it in fact that, or was it because it works with the brain in a particular way?
I think what drew me to hypnotherapy in particular was actually the fact that I have a daughter who's highly dyslexic, who at the time wasn't learning to read and write. And I just thought, I need some way to calm her mind down, because she gets herself into a state of anxiety and I need her to calm down. And once I started training in it, I thought, oh, okay, so this is relevant to a lot more than just my daughter. And yeah, I learned so much about how we get easily triggered. We have, our brain is the most phenomenal. It's set up in a way where you've got your limbic system and your cortex, and they're constantly communicating between each other. But everything goes to your limbic brain first, and which means that your limbic brain processes your emotions. So you feel everything in an instant. And then after that, you think about it. But when we've had difficult experiences, anything from our past, we can get easily triggered to only feel and not think. And particularly with something like Parkinson's, self-esteem for me was a big issue for myself, okay? And it's something which affects a lot of the people who I've worked with, is if you've already got an underlying self-esteem issue, if you've got something where you've already, when you were young, you didn't feel good enough, or you didn't achieve in school, or you had friends who laughed at you, already you've got this underlying issue of, I don't feel good enough. The next thing you know, if you have Parkinson's, or you're caring for someone with Parkinson's, then you already have this predisposition to feel like you're not doing enough, you're not good enough, you're not. So for me as a wife, I never felt like I was doing a good enough job. I always had, as I said, this little voice in my head telling me I'm not good enough. And yes, I went for therapy. I went to another cognitive hypnotherapist who helped me to work out why I think, why I behave like that, where it's coming from. And I work with people as well to help them to be more understanding of why they think like this, where it's coming from, and to be more compassionate to themselves. Parkinson's changes the way you look, it changes the way you behave, but it doesn't change who you are fundamentally as a person.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us about this. We could go on forever. I think, you're welcome. You're welcome. Gosh, lots to think about. So via strength assessment for sure, using positive psychology for sure, you've recommended, and gratitude and finding out who you are and what makes you tick sounds like in some ways common sense, right? But doesn't mean that it's very common, right?
As I said, it's easy for me to sit here and say it, but you know, when you're living it day in, day out, it's easy to forget. And that's when you need people around you to remind you. That's the number one predictor of well-being, isn't it? It's having that social structure, people around you, good relationships, friends. Because if you forget it, they'll remind you.
Right. I think I had a card once that it says, you know, if you forget how amazing you are, and then it opens up and says, I'll remind you.
Love that. I love that.
Is that a great greeting card? Just thank you so much. I want to have you back, of course. I want to talk a little bit more about your research and also about just how that has been for you, right? And even about, you know, your kids and how it's affected them, how growing up with parents, one that's been, you know, involved in research with Parkinson's and working with people living with that, and also, you know, having a dad that before deep brain stimulation, after deep brain stimulation.
It's been quite a journey for them as well, without a doubt. It's deep brain stimulation changed, it reset everything for a long time. It's definitely made a massive difference to the point where I don't think my children recognized how ill their father was until a year before DBS, when he really wasn't very well. And then when he had DBS, it was like, wow. It was like turning back time, and they saw him in a way that they'd never experienced him before, which was just magical. Absolutely. Wow. Magical.
So it really worked for him, and he was able to, he got some of his physical capabilities back. And
it's been amazing for him. He was in bed the year prior, he was in bed pretty much the whole time. He was very, very unwell, and he had DBS, and it really was the next day they switched him on after surgery, and he just got up and walked for the first time, no medication. It was just the most mind-blowing experience. He came home 5 days later and went to the office. You know, it was we hadn't seen him like that. My children didn't remember having a father who was able to do all the things he did in that first year. But for them, it was, I remember asking them once, a couple of years ago, I said, you know, what was it like for you growing up with an ill dad? And they said, we didn't realize he was ill. Until he had surgery, it was just so normal. It was such a normal part of our experience.
Right.
We didn't know.
Yeah.
So, because it didn't stop us from living. You know, if we were going out, okay, so you take a wheelchair if you need, or you go out for 1 hour instead of 5, but you still go out. You know, you do what you can. You live within the confines of what you've been given, but it didn't stop us from living. And so for them, they were amazing.
Yeah, you said to me that you felt like your kids were more empathetic. You know, when we talked before, that having a parent, you know, with Parkinson's sort of created more empathy in for other people. Is that true? Am I remembering that correctly?
Definitely. I think there was always that thing for us where I would always, when we have a bad day, people were always kind. They were always kind. It was, you know, oh, well, maybe Ronnie's not well. And so people tended to be gentle with me and my children. Whereas someone else, if they were having a bad day, if you tell someone something and they snap at you, you could sit there and you could be quite judgmental and quite harsh. And it was always that thing of, girls, our issue, everyone's got something in their life, and ours is incredibly visible, and people are kind and compassionate. But we don't necessarily know what everybody else has going on in their lives. And when you come at life with that kind of mindset, my children grew up with that mindset, it did make them more empathic towards others. It did make them recognize that, you know, everyone has a struggle, a silent struggle. And so they were always kinder, I find. Maybe I'm just being a jerk. I don't know.
No, I interviewed Pam Quinn, and she was talking about that too, and I got a chance to ask her son about it. He happened to be sitting there helping her get set up, and so we sort of just pulled him in, and he was saying, I didn't realize that my mom had Parkinson's, right? It was just normal to me until one of the kids said, how come your dad or your mom sort of stumbles a little bit, So we were talking about your parents, not your parents, your kids. How old are your kids now?
Oh,
4 girls?
4 girls, 18, 20, 22, and 24.
Wow.
Yeah, they're fantastic. They're absolutely fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
And have any of them decided to go into the biz, into like therapy, into helping people with Parkinson's? I'm just curious if
So my second daughter is training as a speech and language therapist. And when she had her interview, they said, do you know of any conditions which this can help? She's like, yes, Parkinson's. And she was very proud of the fact that she's seen her father go through the whole process. And so, yeah, she's very interested in that. I think the others are looking outside of the world of Parkinson's to find their journey and their path. Yeah, I think that's fine.
And what would you recommend for somebody that is a caregiver or newly diagnosed and living with somebody or partnered with somebody who has Parkinson's? Anything that you would recommend or want to talk or say that you wish you had known? Or
Definitely. I think the first thing is don't be afraid to speak to your friends. There's one thing that I learned too late, much too late. I hid away and felt very lonely for a very, very long time. And my husband did the same, and unnecessarily, because our friends are amazing. That, they would have all been there to support us, and we didn't need to struggle on our own. So I think the first thing is don't be afraid. Everyone thinks, I hear this all the time in the therapy room, whenever I ask people, who are your friends? Who's your support network? Do you talk to friends? In fact, one of my, I've done an interview study of caregivers. And one of the questions where I asked these spouses of people whose partners have DBS for Parkinson's, I said, prior to DBS, did you have any social support? Who did you speak to? And I think almost every single one of them has said, no, I never told anyone what was going on for me. I never discussed it with anyone. And it's so funny because I sit there and I'm like, I get it. Don't worry. I know. I understand. I'm the same. But also I sit there and I go, that's such a shame, because those people are they're your support. There's a reason we call it social support. They support you. And what we don't realize is when I ask people why, they said exactly what I had in my head was, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to bring people down. I don't want to hurt someone. I don't want to upset them. Why am I giving them my problems? They've got their own problems in life. There's 1,000 reasons why you don't tell anyone that you're struggling in life. But what we forget is that when we help others, when people receive help, they get a kick of dopamine in their brains, okay? And they feel good. But when we help others, we also get a kick of dopamine in our brains. And so when you think about it in those terms, it's, okay, so what you're actually doing by not asking for help and allowing people to support you, you're denying them that feel-good factor. I think that's right?
Good to look at it. Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's a great
go, oh, and I remember telling someone, I'm like, do you support your friends when they're going through trouble? Yes, of course. I'm like, okay. And does it make you feel good? Yeah, of course. I feel like a better person. I feel like a good friend. I'm like, okay. So you're denying your friends that experience.
Yeah.
Okay. Why? They want to do it. Don't you feel closer to your friend? Don't you feel like you know them better? Don't you feel more connected to them? Doesn't that make you feel like you're part of something bigger? And they always say yes. I'm like, okay. And again, you're denying your friends that. If they're real friends, they are going to want to be part of that experience. And so I think that's the first thing is, don't be afraid to speak to your friends. And I think the other thing is work out what your needs are. Work out what's important to you. What do you need? In any given moment when something is difficult, work out, oh, I wish I had this. Make a list of what your needs are. And then when you've got that and you're in a moment of calm, that's when you can sit down and go, okay, when this is happening, I need this. When this is happening, I need this. Okay. When you're calm, you can think more rationally because, right, your limbic system and your cortex are communicating. Your thinking brain and your emotional brain are communicating again. That's when you can sit there and you go, okay, how can I get this need met? Who do I contact? What could I be doing? And then you can put an action plan together. So those are the things that would be my advice.
I love this advice. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for that little added bonus of what you can do. And I look forward to continuing our conversation as we do this series and having you back on the show. Thank you. Thank you so much. And the time is now to have you back on the show. So that's exciting. Oh, it was so much fun to watch our interview and to be reminded again of all the things that you talked about and the wisdom that you had. And the brain does tend to forget, right? We talked about that a little bit about how we can forget with self-esteem, I'm thinking. We can forget all the amazing things we've done and on a daily basis not feel like we're enough, correct? So I wonder, since you've struggled with that yourself, does a gratitude practice, a daily gratitude practice, help you with that? Help you remember to ground you and center you as you, as a caregiver and as a person with kids who have a father with Parkinson's? Does that help you and a therapist to stay centered?
It definitely is one of the things. I don't think it's the only thing. I think it's one of the things which helps. I always wake up in the morning and I say, thank you for everything you've given me and everything you haven't, everything you will and everything you won't. And that's how I start my day, because and then I will start and I will spend 5 minutes reflecting on what do I have in my life? What don't I have in my life, but in a positive way? It's all of those things, and that will ground me first thing in the morning. But then there are other things which I find are important. For me, it's knowing who I am. I find Parkinson's as an illness is incredibly, because it changes the person who has it. Automatically, it changes the dynamic between the couple, and that changes you as a person as well. And when you are going through these shifts and changes, because it's neurodegenerative, right? So it's happening over time. It's a slow process. So you don't really see necessarily how things are being chipped away. And there comes points where if you're in crisis or even after a moment of difficulty, where all of a sudden you have to sit back and you have to reflect and go, but I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how to cope with these things anymore. And yes, gratitude will bring me back, but then that will only bring me back. Now I need to go further and say, okay, but who am I at my core? And for me, that's looking at my values, looking at the people around me, their values. I think being aware of my values and my strengths, as well as having a daily gratitude practice, I think those are the things which keep me mostly grounded. You know, I still struggle, but
Sure.
mostly grounded.
Can you give a specific example of what you're talking about? It's like, oh, this is sort of gently, the deterioration is happening slowly, and then realizing, oh, they're different, I'm different, and then how leaning into your values helped remind you of how you wanted to show up in that moment. Is there
Yeah,
something specific that comes to mind, or?
absolutely. About 10 years ago, my husband had a problem with his medication and he had to come off his medication. And I didn't notice what was going on with his meds until it really was a problem. But in the meantime, I was living, it was almost like a very reactionary life. I was trying to help him manage his symptoms and manage my children at the same time. And there is no other way of saying it, but I lost my sense of self. And when finally he, the doctor saw what was going on, and we made that shift, it was, okay, but I don't know who I am anymore, because all I know is that I know how to take care of my husband. And even that, I don't feel like I did a very good job at the time, because I didn't notice the changes that were happening. And maybe I could have helped prevent him from suffering until he got to that. And so you have all of these questions going on of who am I? And so I thought I was a good wife and a good caregiver and, a good all of this, but actually, no, not particularly, because I've made all of these errors. And so that was when my self-esteem just dropped. I felt completely useless. And I ended up in therapy, and that, just working with my therapist, it was like, okay, but you're not just a caregiver. You know, who were you when you were with your husband? And it was, well, I was coming from a place of love. I was coming from a place of kindness. I was doing my best to be respectful of his needs. And it's like, okay, so this is who you are. Whether you get it right or not, whether you miss something or not, it doesn't change who you are fundamentally. And so that for me is, yes, I have my daily gratitude practice, but at the same time, it's, whatever I do, am I doing it for the right reasons? Is it coming from the right place? Is it coming from my value system? I need to be living a values led life.
Mhm.
I think does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does, very much so, very much so. And I love that you pointed out that it changes over time. Every relationship, whether it's our own relationship to our own body, or our relationship with others, or a relationship to our institution, or a relationship with aging, changes over time. And then magnified when we have a chronic illness, that degenerative illness that we're working with as well. You mentioned several times that Parkinson's didn't stop you and your husband from living. You made accommodations, bringing wheelchairs with you. How do you encourage someone living with PD to look for those tools to help them live life versus the tendency to become fixated on what they can't do about, the way they used to do things? How do you flip the switch from like the mourning the loss of what I can't do to what can I do in this situation?
I think for everyone, it's going to be different. But I think the key is finding your motivation in life. For me, my motivation was my children. When my husband was diagnosed, we only had two. A couple of years later, we had four kids, and it was, okay, this is my motivation. And it was always in the back of my mind of, my children are going to have a childhood. They're going to have a good childhood. They're going to have amazing memories with their father, and Parkinson's will not stop that from happening. Um, I I was speaking to a gentleman whose wife has Parkinson's, and for them, his motivation is, he wants to spend as much quality time outdoors in nature with his wife. So for him, it was, you know, we got a Zimmer frame when we needed it. We got, whatever it was, and whether it was 5 minute outdoors or an hour outdoors, it doesn't matter. It was, that was his motivation. I want to spend my time in nature with my wife. So it's always, for me, find your motivation. What is that driving force that's going to keep you moving forward in life, and nothing will stop you.
Beautiful. And you mentioned finally the VIA Strengths Assessment. Can you explain a little bit about what it is and how the VIA Strengths Assessment can be a tool for helping folks with Parkinson's and how they can find it?
So there's a website, which I'm hoping you will have the link to.
Yes, we'll put it in the comments for
So
sure.
as I explained, you have intrinsic and extrinsic strengths. So extrinsic things you see, the intrinsic things are the things which feed you and give you strength. And in positive psychology, we've identified 24 strengths that everybody adheres to, and they're universal. Across time, across cultures, everyone adheres to them. And so this tool, it's a questionnaire. And what it does is you answer, it's a lot of questions, but you answer them, and it helps you to see how you prioritize those strengths. So as I said, you've got creativity, love of learning, gratitude, all of these 24 amazing strengths that everybody adheres to. But what the tool does is it helps you to work out, what are your top strengths and what are your lesser strengths? And the more you engage in your top strengths, the more energy you get, I find anyway, the stronger you get.
Has everyone in your family done their VIA strength assessment? And do you do some strength spotting? And do you find that, oh, okay, someone has perseverance and someone has perspective and somebody, has justice or fairness, and does those interactions help or complicate things?
So I have a very human family. And so in the way that human families and human children go, they're like, oh, mom, not with that stuff again, please. So no, my eldest did once. And I know her top strength is humor. But yes, I mean, me, obviously, I will strength spot. I know, my youngest, creativity is her thing. If she's having a bad day, I'll bring out a lump of clay and I'm like, right, mold. My number 3, it is about social justice. She's a team player. It's okay, what could you be doing if she's going through a rough time? What could you be doing? Is there any volunteer work, anything that you could be engaging it? So yes, I'll do it, but I'll do it under the radar, unless if they watch this, at which point they'll know I'm doing it.
Right. I think it's those chefs, the sneaky chef. I interviewed someone who was the sneaky chef, and what she did, her whole thing was how to disguise vegetables for her kids so that they didn't realize they were eating them. It sounds a little bit similar to that. How would therapy be helpful to someone diagnosed with Parkinson's, and when should they seek therapy out?
I think it's very individual, isn't it? I think everyone's going to come to therapy when they need it, if they need it. I think you need to be aware of, if people are telling you, if more than one person tells you, maybe you need to get some help for this, then maybe push yourself along a little bit faster. But therapy, there are different stages to Parkinson's. I think when someone is first diagnosed, acceptance, therapy can help with that, because all of a sudden your future looks very different. Then after that, therapy can help with those interpersonal relationships, those intrapersonal, your relationship to yourself as your body changes, as your ability to control your life changes. It can help with that. So as I said, it depends on the stage of life that you're at, whether you've got Parkinson's, older, younger, lots of different things. Yeah.
My mother is a therapist, and I remember her saying that, Caroline, I recommend when it gets too hard, to not suffer, to ask for help. And I always thought that was a good barometer, and to not kind of stay calm and carry on, that sort of fortitude, muscle through it, or grin and bear it, which can really work against us in well-being, right?
Absolutely. And I think something that we forget is we have those people in our lives who are our non-trained therapists, our siblings, our parents, our friends, and start with them. If therapy is terrifying, start with them, start opening up, see where you go. If you're still struggling, then, go the next step. But if you can't talk to somebody else and you're really bottling inside, then maybe going to a stranger, going to a therapist, they will teach you how to open up. You play it out in the room, and then it'll be that much easier for you to do it with your friends. So your mother sounds like a very wise woman.
Yes, well, I love her very much. She's one of the smartest women I know, as are you. And I'm just delighted that we've started this relationship. I know that you're going to be back for our Parkinson's event on May 25th, and I'm so excited about that too. Anything that you want to share, any final thoughts you want to share, any recommendations of how someone might even find a good therapist? Is there some things that they should be looking for?
I think now that there is no longer the same stigma around mental health as there used to be, I think the first thing, the final thought for me would always be talk, speak to people. Don't be afraid to talk to people. If you know people with Parkinson's, speak to them about what's going on. Ask them what's helped them or who has helped them. That's a very good way of finding someone in your area. Otherwise, join communities. There are Facebook communities for people with Parkinson's. There's something about shared experience which makes it easier. Look for people like you. If you find that you're alone because nobody can understand your experience, look for others who can. And don't discount your friends who don't know what it's like, because the more you talk to them, the more they'll understand, and you won't be alone.
Yeah. And I think that it's very human to have the belief, going back to the brain again, that I'm the only one going through this, right? But when we start to feel our feelings and allow ourselves to feel them, to share them with another, we realize that some of these, into every life, what rain falls. And it might not be exactly the same, but we start to realize, oh my goodness, like Kristen Neff's work, this is part of the human experience. My situation might be unique to me, but part of the human experience is both joy and suffering, right? As Maria Serwa says, the pond, I always think of you guys in England, the pond or the swamp, right? Things can be amazing and beautiful and incredible, and there's also the swamp. And resilience comes from not denying the swamp, but actually acknowledging it and spending more time in the pond. And, and thank you for sharing your lunchtime with us, and for the wonderful resources that you've shared with us today, and for teaching us a few things, a few tips, and giving us a few tips on how to spend more time in the pond. And we'll see you on the 25th. And everybody, thank you. If you want to learn more about Suzette and her work, you can visit her website at www.suzetteshahmoon.com. It is in the comment section, and we've put the links for the VIA Strength Assessment as well to all of our programs here at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan to keep you moving and motivated. Again, anyone can participate. There's just a form that you fill out, and you usually talk to me after that. And remember, we're going to be continuing these conversations on Mondays at noon Eastern Standard Time, and this conversation is really for you. So please let us know what you're interested in learning about or sharing with us. If you have questions about living with Parkinson's or how to best care for someone living with Parkinson's, please let us know as well. You can email Whitney Chapman at wchapman@mmjccm.org. We want to be having the conversations that you want to have, the conversations that matter to you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. A huge thank you to Matt and Whitney, and of course Suzette for spending her bank holiday with us. And on next Monday, May 10th, I'm going to be I'll be showing an interview that I had with Dr. Michael Greger. Hang on to your hats. He's talking about the relationship with Parkinson's and nutrition. And he talks fast, so it's good to listen to it more than once. All right, everyone, take care and have a nice day. Bye.